Hi team, so welcome back to another solo episode by Don. And today, we're going to be talking about vulnerability and why it's not a strength and my thoughts around that. It's short, sharp, simple, to the point. It's 15 minutes long and maybe 2 seconds, as I said it would be. And I really want you to try and think about some of the aspects I speak about in this. I'll ask you a couple of questions towards the end. It would be great if you guys let me know if this resonated with you, because it's not something that I've seen. It's something I have pondered about for like 2 weeks, because I'm like, oh, what if I'm completely missing something? Or is this a point that is so obvious to everyone that they wouldn't even point it out? Take a listen. Let me know what you think. I'm really keen to hear. And also start to look out for just some posts about the challenges that are going out. I'm going to start to run a challenge and we're going to get the ball rolling again. And I cannot wait. I'm so excited for it. All right. Anyway, enjoy the episode. So welcome back to the Identity Human podcast with your host, Don. Yes, once again, I'm going solo. It's been quite a good run of them, hasn't it? It's really allowed me to just speak without being told that it doesn't make sense in a good way. Obviously, that's why I appreciate having Ray here, but she's been very busy in a good way. I think busy is quite an interesting word, and we'll get her back on soon. But what's today about? So I'm going to try and make it short, sharp, punchy, give you as much value as possible and let you carry on with your day. So we're aiming for the heart. Like I'm talking about, like, I'm not going for the fluff. I'm going for something rhymes with fluff in there. And it occurred to me the other day, I don't know where it came from, download, call it whatever you want, but it was around vulnerability. Now, I've seen a few things, and over the last couple of years, especially going to the leadership space, it talks about vulnerability. And I'm like, what is it? Like, what is it about being vulnerable? Where do people get that strength from? And, the courage to be vulnerable. And I realized the other day that actually it's not a strength to be vulnerable. Now, bear with me, okay? So I know you might be like, oh, of course it is. Of course it's a strength. Yes, of course it's a strength. But here are the context I'm talking about. So when you see someone being vulnerable, you go like, wow, that was amazing. Or someone comes off and goes, sorry, that was so hard. That's probably where we need to define that it's strong. Like that's where they're using strength. But I don't think it's as much strength as it is being brave and being courageous to put themselves out there. And I get it, right? And I'm all for it because that's growth. And you don't just get to the end point without going through that. But what if we see it in the wrong way and we're setting ourselves up to fail because we're trying to grow the strength to be vulnerable? I'm going to go and be brave. I'm going to go and put myself out there. I'm going to go and show you what's happening underneath the hood. And I think the issue comes that vulnerability is only hard when it's rooted in shame. Okay, so bear with me. What does that mean? It means that, like, have you ever seen someone talking so freely and so accepting of who they are, how they are, and what they've been through to get to that point? If you haven't, go right now to episode 50 and listen to what Craig Lewis has to say. That whole interview, I've watched it and I've sat there and just gone, it was the first time I've actually in life experienced, not in life, as in he was literally sitting a meter away from me. And that energy, that there was no shame in what he was saying. There was obviously like, oh, I can't believe I did that. That's not shame though. That's kind of like recognition that was like, man. But what it was rooted in was acceptance. So there was two roots. Vulnerability being a strength, needing strength to be vulnerable is rooted in shame because you're not proud. You're ashamed of what you're being vulnerable about. And that is rooted in a lack of acceptance. Okay, so I'm just gone straight for it. Now, that you can be vulnerable easily without needing the strength to be vulnerable. It just is natural. Do you see the difference? Like some people just sit there and they can just say things and call things out and just talk naturally in flow because there's no shame in under the hood. There's no, they've accepted that's how they are, that's who they are, and they love. I mean, I would not hesitate to say, I would say that they have learned to love everything about them, not just one thing, not just the thing that you see, but they love what you see and they love what you don't see. And I think where we look at vulnerability being a strength and it was so hard and wow, I can't believe how vulnerable it is actually it's because there's still shame under the hood. There's still a lack of acceptance. And I think that's a really, which like a lot of, people talk about shadow work. I like the things that sit deep within. I think that's where we've got to realize that shame, i.e., lack of acceptance, sits as this invisible wall that we don't know is there because it's invisible, right? It does. It feels hard because you keep banging your head against it. I'm being vulnerable. I'm being vulnerable, and I still feel like I'm making no progress. I'm showing people what I'm about. But actually, under the hood, what people can see, they can see through that wall and behind what's happening. There's shame and there's lack of acceptance. And that's why sometimes you struggle to be wholly truthful and stand there and going like, this is who I am. I think that's where that's the work on. Because I suppose I'm just reading some of the notes I made, is maybe it only feels like a strength when you're fighting against shame, fear, or judgment. And I suppose what I really wanted to bring around was that when you see someone being vulnerable and you go, wow, that's strong. When you feel like maybe not when you feel, it definitely applies to when you see someone else being vulnerable and you admire that, right? So you just go, wow, they have just said that. I can't believe they said that, but they said it so openly. They fully own that, and it resonates with you, right? And you're just so inspired by it. And maybe it's because vulnerability is only impressive when it reveals something that you still hide. So I'm gonna leave that with you, right? So I want you to think about all the messages that resonated with you when you were watching someone else, and you were like, wow, I can't believe that. You recognize it in them when they say it because it's in you. Does that make sense? Because there is a whole lot of people talking on the internet at the moment, and not all of it resonates with you, but because it's not in you. Does that make sense? So if you watch, for example, if you're not addicted to drugs or porn, or you don't have that addiction thing, when you see someone speaking about addiction, you're just like, oh, okay, like it's a great story, but it doesn't inspire you. Whereas you can have someone speaking just about their mental struggles, for example, or how, like, let's narrow it even down even more, where someone talks about how they act towards their kids because they were frustrated and they were stressed, and you go, wow, I can't believe they've said that, like, in front of everyone. Hang on, that's resonated with you, but the person talking about their drug addiction and everything they went to and how they ruined their life, that didn't hit you as hard, that's because the thing that someone else was vulnerable about is what you still hide. And that's a really good way to self-reflect. If you don't know what your shadow is, what that invisible wall is, think about what resonates. Have you ever heard that saying, we judge others how we judge ourselves? Just think about that. So what resonates with us for others is because it's something that we recognize within ourselves. And that's a way you start to become aware of, like, oh, okay, that's why that vulnerability meant something. I'm just trying to look through any of the notes. The next theme, as I've got in notes, is there is also a different type of vulnerability that I think that it's quite obvious, isn't it? It's what's called like performative vulnerability, and then you've got integrated. So integrated vulnerability is just when someone is just natural. They're not doing it for likes. It comes up in conversation. It's just so natural. Again, genuinely go and watch episode 50. Like, Craig isn't saying any of that stuff. He's saying for an end result. He was fully just speaking in the moment. And then you go and watch performative vulnerabilities, is watch someone that's scripted a story, for example, and they're doing it for an effect. It's almost like pre-planned. I think that performative. It doesn't mean it's not easy, and it may not always be the case where it's not being authentic, but I think maybe that's the double up, is authentic vulnerability is rooted in acceptance and self-love and self-compassion, whereas that performative one, or any other form of vulnerability where you feel like having to force something, or it took a hell of a lot out of you, is because it was this moment, it's something in you that you feel shame about that you're then speaking on, and that's when it becomes really hard. Which does bring me down to the next kind of layer of this is, let's encourage any form of vulnerability, even if it is hard, and even if it is something that that took a lot of strength. Like, I'm all for that. Like, because at the very beginning I said that's the end point, is when you're speaking and it just becomes so natural. There's no energy. That's that real strength, not the real strength, that real vulnerability. Just that's the end goal. Whereas in order to get there, if you are rooted in shame, you don't see it. You've got to take steps to get from where you are to where you want to be. And that means you're going to have to work through this feeling of shame or lack of acceptance until you realize that shame is all in your head, or it's rooted in societal constructs that you've got to decide on your own, or it's rooted in people's opinions and your upbringing, or they currently surround you. And why does that, why are you allowing that to hold something back within you? Does that make sense? So I want us to just start to think about us. Why have we not accepted? Why are we still holding shame? And shame, like a lot of people, I think, are walking around with shame. And it's another way of talking about it is it's a conditioning. The conditioning of your upbringing, the conditioning of your social circles, the conditioning of what you think society holds you to account on is essentially shame. And that's shame is stopping you from unleashing your true self. So if you have shame in there, you're not going to unleash your true potential. You can be strong, you can be brave, but if you haven't dealt with that shame, if you haven't really come to true acceptance, then I fear that you're going to be on this hamster wheel cycle, this circular route where you put in a lot of effort, you're vulnerable, but you get back into a point where it pushes you back to that shame, because that's what it's rooted in. And we need to try and deal with those. I think that's the real strength in the journey, is owning your identity so deeply that vulnerability comes natural. That's where I want you to think about getting to. Is it does, obviously this is Identity Human Podcast. There is a core element of this that does come down to how you see yourself, regardless of how other people see you, how you carry yourself, regardless of what you're carrying yourself into. That's where you get that real strength from, so that you become unshakable, regardless of whether you're putting yourself on social media, Instagram, or walking into a multinational, multi-global, billionaire's house, business, wherever you want to be. You carry this sense of self that is so strongly rooted in acceptance that there is no shame. So people can't knock you off your pedestal. And I don't mean pedestal from an arrogant point of view. I mean pedestal from, this is what I believe in, and I'm going to have open conversations with you. I'm going to be accepting. I'm not going to be judgmental, but it's not going to change my stance. And I've said it in a couple of episodes, that's where we start to look into building faith in ourselves and not building in belief in ourselves. There's a very subtle difference. One is too certain, one is uncertain. I think I want us to just really start to embrace that. So if you are listening to this, then I want to invite you to stop being vulnerable and just try and do the work to fully accept yourself. Does that make sense? So think about the things that you're not proud of within yourself. Think about the things that you have memories of that still play there that you wouldn't want to go back to. And actually just think about, that's happened. It's built you into who you are. And you can do a visualization type of exercise where you do go back and you are running on memory lane, what I call it. You're just running and you're heading towards the end goal, whatever that end goal is towards you, symbol, vision, wherever it is. And on this memory lane are clouds that sit right and left of you. And in each cloud, as you run, is just memories of you. Could be as a child, teenager, anything. And those memories sit there. And you can either carry on running and leave them, which means that there's going to be shame because you don't want them as part of you, or you picture them joining you on this run, so that they all become integrated, and you start essentially, you eventually come in your own run club, right? But you've got that. It's a process of bringing everything to who you are in that moment as one. That's where you get that strength of acceptance, and you're not ashamed of who you are. You are fully owning it. And I think that's probably a really timely message for myself. And obviously, if I'm talking individually, I mean on my own, a lot of the messages I'm giving to you guys are the message I'm giving to me. And I think that's often how life goes. And so those of you that listen to this are the ones that need it. Okay. So I just want to throw this out there. Vulnerability doesn't need strength. Vulnerability needs acceptance. And then it's not vulnerability. It's just talking as to who you are. It's just talking on a natural level where it doesn't take effort. You're not ashamed of who you are. Okay, let's chase that. Let's make sure we're working towards that and questioning ourselves and raising self-awareness so that we can become integrated, whatever word you want to put there. So I had a couple of questions just to close off here. What are you still calling strength that's actually just resistance to who you are? So were you using strength or willpower to be something that's actually resisting who you are? Oh, but I don't want to show that part of me, so I'm going to be strong and I'm going to talk about that. So just let that ponder through. If it doesn't make sense, put a comment on. We can talk through it on the episode. And then the last one, the goal isn't to be strong enough to be vulnerable. It is to be free enough that you don't need to be. Does that make sense? So the goal is not to be strong enough to be vulnerable. The goal is to be free enough that you don't need to be. Okay, so think about it. Thank you for listening. That brings us to 14 minutes and 50 seconds. Like I said, I wanted to make this short and sharp. And I'm going to say it again, as always. Ubuntu, we are who we are through others. I'm going to work on me so that I'm going to work on me for you so that you can work on you for me. Have a great day.